What's up, guys? Just making a neck training video today. I saw Leo in Longevity recently just made a video about his neck training, and so I'm going to comment on that here. So this is now going to be my third video I made on neck training. One was maybe 1 to 2 years ago, commenting on Jason Blaha's comments on it and how Alpha Destiny was commenting on it. And I think Alpha Destiny kind of popularized it more so in the fitness space here. He was doing a lot of like direct neck training, heavy rack pulls, things like that to build up the neck. I talked about it also from like a sleep apnea standpoint. I've mentioned before, I do treat patients with sleep apnea. It's something I'm fairly familiar with. I've had a few sleep apnea tests myself, and I do help design devices for patients who have mild to moderate sleep apnea. Now, it doesn't take a lot to notice in this video that I do not have a particularly thick neck, right? This is something I've mentioned before, so why am I making a video on neck training? One, again, is the background with sleep apnea, but two is because even though it's not very big, it has improved in size. And so at the same body weight, which I think is really important because, you know, if you look at somebody gained 30 pounds, I mean, obviously their neck can get a lot bigger, and it almost certainly would. But for me, one measure of, okay, how much bigger are they really is like at the same body fat at the very least, right? You know, you can gain an inch on your arms, but if you gain 3 inches on your waist, probably not the best proportion. So for me, at 190 pounds, I used to actually only have a 15-inch neck right at the Adam's apple. Now it's about 16 and a quarter. And at the base down here, it's close to about 17 and a half. So certainly not a very big neck, but to put about 1.5 inches on my neck in really about a year of training it, I was pretty happy with that. Would I want much bigger? Maybe a little bit, but not much at this point. But certainly if you look at somebody like Alpha Destiny or Leo, he has a really thick neck, right? I mean, he said he's not even training it now, and he mentions appropriately that a lot of that is muscle memory that he had. I think he said a 21-inch neck, which is crazy. And looking at him now, I mean, if this is 17 at the bottom and 16 and a half here, I'd say he's got to be 18 plus inches. I mean, his neck is very big, and he mentions it's from muscle memory, gaining some weight, having higher androgen levels in his blood. So things like that are really going to make a difference and be responsible for a lot of that size that he's recently seen. Now, people have asked me in those other videos, well, if I do neck training, sometimes it's just a very generic question, will it cause sleep apnea? Or they'll say, hey, I'm this height and I'm this weight, or my neck is this size now, am I at a risk of sleep apnea? And the thing is, it's a very hard question to ask, especially if just online, because I don't know anything else about you. I don't know what other risk factors you have for sleep apnea. But I totally agree with the premise of Leo's video and what he says about it. Sleep apnea is very serious, and sleep apnea correlates with a lot of other health issues. So it's definitely something to be aware of. It's definitely not something to trivialize. And if you look at where I started with a 15-inch neck, right? So that risk factor itself is pretty low for me. Now, there could be other risk factors, right? If somebody has a really large tongue, if they have small airway space, that's another risk factor. Certainly there's a genetic component to it. So it's not just about neck size, but there is a reason that you do see a lot of bodybuilders or like jiu-jitsu guys who get these big necks who run into issues. And going back to the muscle memory point, it's hard to reverse. You know, I mean, I have a lot of friends who had 5-6 years really serious in the gym. They barely lift now, but they've maintained, because they're still heavier, they've maintained a lot of that muscle. And so if you do get to a point where if you're, have a really impressive neck like Leo and it's 20 inches, even if you stop training it, it's unlikely that that's ever going to go back. And so if you have gotten to the point where now you have serious apnea, that can be a problem. So it's not something that I would just completely ignore. But again, if you're somebody who, maybe you think of yourself as a pencil neck or something like that, I wouldn't say don't train it. In the same way that I wouldn't recommend somebody not do jujitsu or wrestling or something like that. I used to wrestle, and at that point, I did have probably a thicker neck just naturally. One of the reasons that people do like to train their neck and they don't want a skinny neck, I remember even hearing Joe Rogan talk about how somebody just doesn't look like tough or powerful if they have a skinny neck. And there is something to be said for that. If you ever saw Jersey Shore or Mike, the Situation had a particularly skinny neck for how big his body was. And it just has a different look to it. I remember seeing in a yearbook where, you had everybody and there was this one guy who just looked really tough, and it was kind of like hard to pinpoint why. And again, he just had this thick neck. It does kind of have a powerful appearance. And so a lot of people who are into lifting and looking stronger and bigger, when you have clothes on, you can see your calves, your forearms, and your neck, right? And I've seen guys like some rock climbers, for instance, who were maybe 150, 160 pounds, but they had these meaty forearms and a big neck, and they really looked fit, even if they were not actually that big. So with all that said, just a few points I wanted to make, because again, I have had people DM me or mention in comments about the neck training videos I've made, maybe some of the discrepancies I have between what I recommend and what Leo recommends. But again, if you're just looking at size, I mean, his neck is way bigger, so take that for what you will. Now, he discusses a neck harness. Now, if you look behind my shoulder over there, there is a neck harness there, and it's very similar to the one that he mentioned, I believe, that he talked about on ironmind.com. So this is the one I have, had it for a couple years, holds up very well. And he mentioned that he doesn't like those because you can't lie horizontally. And so the only way to load the neck will put a lot of pressure on the spine. So for one, I don't know if that level of pressure, and it depends on the weight you're using. I mean, this might be a difference where you talk to a 700-pound squatter and you talk to a 350-pound squatter, and the programming might be very different, because even though that 700-pound squatter is bigger, the effects on the joints and the musculoskeletal system are still going to be more significant. Even though he's bigger and the muscles can take it, there are potentially going to be joint issues there. So Leo talked about using 150 pounds, and I can tell you that I don't do anything like that. And I've seen people on YouTube put on 100+ pounds on their neck, and they're just like yanking it up and down. I definitely do not do that. I do find that there's some strain above a certain weight, and I will literally just take 45 pounds and I will go super slow, shorter rest periods and higher reps. So I'm talking 45 pounds for 40 to 50 reps, and slow and controlled. We've all seen the studies where a lighter weight, as long as the intensity is sufficient and you're pushing yourself hard, is enough for hypertrophy. And because it's it's an area where there is risk, it's not something that I would say do a 10 rep max on. Okay, I am doing somewhere between 20 and 50 reps most of the time, and that's generally what I recommend, because there can be some strain. But for, like I said, 45 pounds for me, it's not something I'm particularly worried about. Somebody I talk to quite a lot is a PMR physician, so that's physical medicine and rehabilitation. And I've discussed it with them, and he's very up to date on the science, and he's very up to date on his field. And he himself has said that he doesn't feel like it would really be an issue, and if anything, it would help. So many of you know I'm a dentist. I'm constantly leaning over and doing procedures most of the day. If anything, I feel like I've had less upper back and neck pain since incorporating neck training personally. And there's a reason, of course, that fighters and people who are in certain sports will implement it as well. So that was one point where I maybe disagree a little bit. One other thing I would say is that he said that with the harness that you can't do it horizontally, that you can't lie on a bench. And he mentioned that he would tie a towel around or a cloth around his head, and he would use that to hook up to a machine and I guess go back and forth like that. This might again be a difference where it's the weight that I'm using that allows me to do this, but I have no problem going horizontally with it, and that is exactly what I do actually. So it is true that for the neck extensions here, I will lean over, and so there is probably a little bit more tension on the spine. But for neck flexion, I lie off of a bench and I let it go back and I come up, and I'll do that for 15 to 30 reps. No problems at all. It doesn't slide off. I mean, I guess if you have to pay attention to it, you have to get it set low enough on your head, but it does not come off. And the same with the side laterals. I will lie off the bench and I will just have it go in, and I'll go up and down, go to the other side, up and down. I've really not had much of an issue with it sliding off. If it does, it takes a very little force just to hold it there. So for instance, if I'm going this way, a little bit of force, come up, keeps it on. So that has not been an issue for me at all. But again, we're talking 30, 40, 50 pounds, and high reps. We're not talking 100+ pounds. And maybe that would be an issue, and that could be the difference. But for me, I do agree to do it horizontally. I just haven't had that issue. I did actually an experiment for a while where I incorporated side extensions, because after a year, I stopped seeing growth. So as most of you know, I do recommend particular gaining phases. And this was something where over a period of time, I was gaining weight. I eventually cut back down, and that's when I saw, hey, over about a year at the same body weight, same body fat, I had put on over an inch on my neck, and I was pretty happy with that because, like I've said before, at this point in my lifting career, not much is really changing, so that was nice to see. But I was just doing extensions and flexions, right? And so basically front and back like that. And so I wanted to see, well, would adding side extensions help? Could that give me something else? And so for about 3 or 4 months, I did that. And I was pretty surprised actually to find that it did not help at all. And you would think, okay, I mean, there are different muscles, and I'm not sure if it's just that these are engaging sufficiently in the traditional extensions and flexions. But for me personally, I did not see any additional growth, because I agree with what Leo said. I think, to have the width here is what most people are looking for. You don't really want like a ton back here, right? I mean, not that I think it's going to cause a huge problem, but I think a lot of people are looking for that size from the front. But to my surprise, I found that that really did not give me any benefit. So I stopped doing it after maybe 3-4 months. I don't think it's bad to do it all. It's, if anything, it's just more volume. So if you find that more volume will help you, that could be a great way to add it. It just didn't really help me. So again, guys, relatively short video here. I just wanted to say that I liked Leo's video. I agree with it. I will link it down below for those of you who want to check it out and see that I mean, it's actually pretty amazing how much his neck has grown, because I remember when I had him on the podcast and he had a relatively skinny neck, probably a little bit thinner than mine, and now it's huge. So it's really interesting to see that that's just from muscle memory, and apparently a lot of his viewers noticed that as well. And I just wanted to comment on it regarding the sleep apnea side of it, because I want to make sure that I don't trivialize it in my other videos, that it is significant. And if you are somebody who already has a larger than average neck, it's something to be aware of, it's something to monitor, and maybe even do a sleep study if you feel like you might be at risk. And then also I just wanted to comment on how I implement it and some ideas. And I think there are other sources that are great too, such as Alpha Destiny, who has some good material on it as well. So if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below on what you want to see more of. It also helps with the algorithm. So thank you guys for that.